We're playing poker in Texas, an explosive session. We're in the game for nearly $2,000 at one point, and we need to crawl out of the hole. We buy into the 1-2 game for $500. It's 12 o'clock at night, and let's get started. In this first hand, we look down at pocket threes in the small blind. There's a middle position raise to 15. The button, myself, and the big blind call. So now we're going four ways out of position to a flop, which you guessed it, we drill a set on king 6-3. I check, and the big blind checks to the middle position aggressor. He c-bets for 15. The button calls, and you know we're going to pump in money when we drill a set, especially the bottom set, which needs some protection, but mostly we're going for value. So we check raise to $60. The big blind obviously folds, and then it gets back to the middle position player who decides to call, and the button raises, and now we got to play this pot out of position, but we still have a set. The turn brings the 7 of spades, a great card for us if we're bluffing with a straight draw like 4-5, but obviously I'm assuming our opponent has a king of some sort like ace king, king queen, and now it's time to go for max value against that holding. We're gonna go a little bit over half the pot. We're gonna make it $115, and our opponent takes around a minute and a half to call, and when the river brings in the 10 of diamonds, we're only losing to a couple of hands here, but the goal is to get max value, and since we just sat down and we drilled a set, we're gonna go for value here, and we go all in. We put our entire stack in the middle, but sadly the opponent decides to let his cards go, but we have a $410 pot coming our direction. In this next hand, we look down at ace king offsuit in the cutoff. There's a raise from middle position to 15, and we're going to 3-bet this premium to $60, and only the middle position player calls. We're going heads up to a flop, which is great for our hand. It's ace 10-3 with 2 diamonds. A perfect board for us to c-bet our range. We're going to bet around $65, and surprisingly, my opponent decides to check raise us to $170. I think the only thing that makes sense here is to continue and call and evaluate a turn, so that's what we do. The turn brings the 6 of spades, and our opponent decides to bet again, but now he goes for a value size, $225. He only has $200 behind, and I think with ace king at the top of our range, we're just going to jam here and get value from hands like ace jack, ace queen, maybe ace 9. So we put it all in, and our opponent calls instantly. So now it feels like he has ace 10 or a set, and most likely we're going to be losing this pot. So we turn over the ace king. The river is the 9 of clubs. We're ready to lose this pot, but our opponent surprisingly mucks. So we win around a $1,255 pot coming our direction. In this next hand, we look down at ace queen offsuit, a premium hand. It limps to us. There's a $5 straddle on, so we're going to go 5x here. We make it $25, the standard size here in Texas, and we get 3 callers. We're going 4 ways to a flop with 100 in the middle, and it comes 8-6-8 rainbow. Not a very good board multi-way for our range, so when it checks to us, we check to the cutoff, and he decides to put out a wager of $30, and then both the big blind and the undergun player put in the call, and now we want to put some pressure here. I don't really think this is smart looking back, but we end up raising to $150, representing overpairs, but only under the gun call. So now there's $400 in the middle, and the turn is the ace of clubs. And when we hit our pair, I don't want to bloat this pot because it only seems like we're up against 8s, maybe 6s, and sometimes an overpair here and there like 9s or 10s. So we decided to check this back. We don't want to bloat it any more than we just did. Kind of contradictory, but is what it is. The river is the 3 of clubs, and our opponent goes for a pretty medium sizing. He makes $225 on the river. That's nearly half the pot, and I got to pay this off with top pair. And he drills quad 8s. There's no bad beat jackpot here, so there's no real reason to celebrate. But this is the beginning of our Nemesis's story, so let's continue further. And don't forget, if you want to play with me online or just looking for some crazy action or just to get started on poker, try online the Cheddar Club. The link is in my bio, and just let them know that FunkyPoker sent you, and you'll get a deposit bonus. Thank you so much for your support. All right, this next hand is action focused. We're just going to fast forward to my raise. I have queen jack offsuit, and there's 1 caller, and the small stack goes all in for $100, and we want to give him some action, so we ISO raise to $350. Very loose, I know, but you got to give action to receive action. That's something I really do believe in. Luckily, I play poker for fun, and I don't need the earnings to survive. Luckily, I just love the game and putting people in tough spots. We pretty much ISO raise, but now we're heads up against the small stack, and the flop comes 10-7 ace. The turn is the 6, And the river is unbelievable, the king of clubs. So we drill the straight to win against ace 4 of hearts. We get the nut straight, the Broadway. So we scoop this $220 pot coming our direction. If you're enjoying the vlog, make sure you guys subscribe and join my poker journey. And we are running hot this session. In the next hand, we look down at ace, queen offsuit with the ace of clubs and the queen of spades. There's a $5 straddle on, and under the gun decides to limp, and we decide to raise to $40 here. I think the size is just a little too big, but we'll adjust as we go. And we end up getting 2 callers. We're going 3 ways to a flop, which comes king, deuce, 3 with 2 clubs. And I think this is a great board for us because we have all the kings and we have the ace of clubs, removing any possible nut flush draws. The only hands we have to worry about would be like king, queen of clubs, but I think that's very unlikely since nobody re-raised. But we're going to continue here for $55, and if any club comes, we're going to barrel off our entire stack. That is the plan. We end up getting 1 caller, and that's the big blind. So now we're heads up, and the turn is that magical card where we gain a lot of equity. It's the 4 of clubs. So we have a straight draw, we have 1 over, and we have the nut flush draw. So with all this equity, I want to make sure to put max pressure against all other hands, such as like a rag king, or maybe a hand like king 10, king 9 that can find an easy fold here. So we decided to bet very large, nearly the size of the pot. We make it $220, and our opponent calls very fast. That was a little surprising, but since our opponent didn't think about check raising, maybe has a weak hand, just like I mentioned before. So when the river peels the 10 of diamonds, the only hand that would feel semi-strong on this board would be king 10 for 2 pair. But even that combo should be scared of the nut flush draw because we have that in our range and we block that. So it's very unlikely that we're up against a flush right now. It feels like a king holding, and the only way to get that hand to fold is to go all in. And I think we got to continue our bluff here because there's $680 in the middle, and we want to win that. And we essentially set up the turn bet to jam the river because we're going to represent the nut flush. So we go all in for $550. After sitting in my chair and sweating my balls off, our opponent decides to call. That's very painful. We show him that we only have ace high, and he turns over one of those hands that we were targeting, king 6 of hearts. So I'm not very upset about the bluff. I'm sad it got called, but the bluff feels right, and I'm happy how I played it because I've been looking for spots like these to represent the nuts or a stronger hand. But what would have been better if I were to bet a little bit smaller on the turn, sort of like half pot, and then over bet the size of the pot on the river. That is what it is, and we lose a massive pot, and now it's time to rebuy. This is where funkypunts comes into play. We rebuy for $500 in the very next hand. We're up against the same opponent. So what happens is we made a call of the big blind. It checks to the same opponent on the button. He bets $100, and we decide to apply max pressure with just king high, 2 overcards. So we go all in as a pure bluff, and our opponent ends up snap calling us and shows us pocket aces, and we're dead on the turn. So then we lose another $500, and we rebuy in again. A little bit of a punt here, but we have a strong mentality moving forward. That's what I thought in the moments, but you'll see what happens in this vlog. And this hand gets wild so fast. It is unbelievable. There's 3 limps, and the middle position player, the same opponent from last hand, raises to $30. So right here is the perfect example of the button straddle and the power behind it. We have ultimate last action, so it skips over us, and everybody who limped in decides to call. So that's 4 people calling, and now there's nearly $120 in the pot, and now the options on us to call, fold, or raise. And we're going to put in the raise here because we have a premium holding, so we make it $150. So then it folds back to our arch nemesis in middle position, and he calls, and then the short stack decides to shove for $330. So that's technically a raise. We have one of the best hands in poker, and we decide to re-shove for our entire stack. We just rebought, so we go all in for now $500. So now our opponent has to call around $350 to get in this pot, and guess what he does? He puts in the chips. So this pot has ballooned up to nearly $1,400, and we're going to 1 flop. So the flop comes the deuce of hearts, the 6 of spades, and the 3 of spades. The turn is the ace of hearts. We have top pair, top kicker, and the river is the queen of diamonds. And our arch nemesis flips over ace, queen of spades, and we lose this massive pot again. And the shorty stack had queen jack offsuit, so this is an action table, but ouch, this one really hurt. You can hear how distraught I was in the moment. All right, it's time to shake it off. We rebuy in for $500. We're in $2,100 for the entire game. All right, this hand is a little unorthodox. We have Jack 7 of diamonds under the gun, and we decide to limp. There's a $5 straddle on, so we put in $5 in the middle, and then it gets to the middle position player who raises to $15. And this is where the snowball effect starts. Middle position 2, the cutoff, the small blind, the big blind, and myself call. So now this pot is massive, and then it gets back to the button on the straddle with ultimate last action, our arch nemesis. He decides to raise to 105. So then the small blind decides to call. He's very tilted because the button player, the arch nemesis, cracked his kings with 9-8 offsuit. And then it gets to the big blind who makes it 130. And now in my notes, it says we have implied odds because I'm assuming everyone behind us is going to call as well. And our hand is complete garbage and nothing really justifies this. But we decided to put in the call. I think this is a fold 100% of the time. I don't know what I'm doing here. And I don't think there's any way to justify this. But we put in the money and then 2 more players join us. So now we're going 5 ways to a flop. There's $650 in the middle, and the flop comes queen, queen 4 with 2 spades. The small blind decides to go all in for $18, the rest of his stack. So the middle position and myself and the button decide to call. Now there's $700 in the middle, and the turn is the 5 of diamonds. I check, the other opponent checks, and now it's back on the button, and he decides to bet $225. And, I mean, our odds here are ridiculous. Maybe we'll be good if we hit a jack or a 7 or a spade. So we put in $225 with only $50 behind. The river is the ace of spades. We check to our arch nemesis, and he checks back, and we show the jack 7 of spades for the flush, and we scoop a $1,200 pot. And after this, we just could not believe how hilarious this was because we're playing horrible poker, and we just got rewarded from the gods because it did not feel like we were meant to win this hand, but we did because of how bad we feel like we've been running into it today. But somehow this pot is coming our direction. And do not copy what I'm doing here. It is not smart, obviously. And in this next hand, this is the highlight of the entire vlog and how we get out of the hole. This is just 2 hands later after winning that hand with Jack 7 of spades. And we look down at pocket queens in late position. And the action begins with under the gun. He raises to $15. Then under the gun 2 calls, and middle position player that was tilted raises to 75. And then the middle position 2 player calls the 75. What do we do here with pocket queens? Obviously, we're going to re-raise. So we decide to 4-bet to $325. Our goal is to isolate or to take down the pot right now because there's so much in the middle. But it folds to the first middle position player, and he goes all in for $330. And the middle position 2 player calls with only $200 behind. And now we're sort of confused. Like, what are we doing? How is this going to play out? We're all looking at each other, and I call the rest of the money, which is $25 more. So the pot is $1,050, and the flop comes 3-4 king with 2 spades with an overcard. Our opponent to our right checks, and I check back. The turn is the 3 of clubs. He checks, and I check back. And the river is unbelievable. It is the queen of spades. We only lose to pocket 3s and pocket kings now. We have the 3rd best possible hand on this board. So when it checks to us, we decide to go all in. And then my opponent to the right said, I thought we were going to be checking this board down. So now I feel kind of bad. Maybe he has jacks or 10s. So we turn over the queen just to let him know. I doubt that he has a king because he would have snap called here. I was attempting to soft play, sort of just give him an out because he was a nice fellow. But he ends up calling me with ace king. And middle position 1 player who jammed had ace queen, so that was the last queen in the deck. And we just win with queens full in this $1,500 pot. And we are just in utter shock, and we can't believe that we're now officially out of the hole. We are up and over $2,100. That was how much we bought into the small stake game. After nearly an hour later, we decided to rack up our chips and cash out. And in this game, we actually made money, which is unbelievable to say. We end up profiting $240, and that's going to pay for late night canes. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. This one was a wild session. and not something very proud of. A little embarrassed, but we had a lot of fun, and I'm glad to share it with y'all. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.